In the last video, we went over the basics of verb phrase structure in Pashto. And in this video, we're going to talk about how we can shorten up those verb phrases. Now, this is something really special in Pashto. It's very cool, but it really trips a lot of learners up. Thankfully, there's an extremely simple and clear rule that tells us how we can do it. And that's what we want to explain today as we play with the LingDocs Pashto Dictionary. So you may have heard someone say something like, Ma ta'ulide, I saw you. But they can also say, Ma ulide. They can also say, Tame ulide. Or they can say, Wumilide. And all of these mean, I saw you. And so you might be thinking, how on earth are people doing this? And how can I make sentences like this? And how can they be shortened up this way? So there's like I said, there's a very simple rule for how this works in Pashto, and that's what we want to get into today. So let's look at the verb to see. So here's our roots and stems, and we want to start building phrases with it. So let's build a present phrase. Let's say, I see you. Okay, Zatawinam. Let's look at the parts that we have right here. Now, remember from the previous video, this is a transitive verb in the present tense, so we're going to use that phrase structure, the non-past transitive phrase structure. That means the subject is the king, the object is the servant, and then of course the verb agrees with the king. So here's the full sentence that we have here, Zatawinam. Now what we can do to shorten this phrase up, there's two things we can do. We can kill the king or we can shrink the servant. What on earth does that mean? So, first of all, we can kill the king. We can get rid of the king of the sentence. The king is already controlling the verb, so you don't have to actually mention it. So, instead of z ta'winam, we can just get rid of the king and we can say ta'winam, like this. And so in the dictionary, you can either click here or you can click here to say no king. Take the king out. Ta'winam. Another thing you can do is you can shrink the servant. Now, so his servant is the object. We can press this little magic wand and shrink the servant into a mini pronoun. Zadewinam, just like that. Now, if you don't know what mini pronouns are, you can look in the grammar and see what they are. And here's a little chart. So notice we can shrink the servant and we can kill the king, or we can do both of those things. So we could say both, and then we have winamde. So the king is disappeared from the sentence, and the servant has become a mini pronoun. Now, there's another thing to notice about here. Notice how the de goes at the end of the sentence. What's going on here? So let's look at the blocks of a sentence here. We can see we have a subject, we have an object, and we have a verb. When we shrink the servant becomes a mini pronoun, and the mini pronoun always goes in the kids section. So let's shrink them into the mini pronoun, and the kids section always comes after the first block. So if I say zadewinam, then the de has to come in the kids section. If I also eliminate the king of the sentence, so I don't want the king either, then winam de. Then the de has to come after the verb, just like that. So these are the two things you can do to shorten a phrase. You can shrink the servant and you can kill the king. So let's look at a different example. Let's look in the past tense. This is going to be totally different. Well, it's going to be the same, but totally different. You'll see what I mean. So if I say, I saw you. Now we have the subject is the servant and the object is king. Ma te wulide, or the example that I gave at the beginning. So now we can kill the king means that we take out the te, the subject. So it's ma wulide, like that. And we can also shrink the servant. Tame wulide. So I saw you, like that. Or we can do both, and then it's wumilidele, like that. Now what's going on here? Let's look at the blocks. We've got a subject, which is the servant. We have an object, which is the king, and then we have wulidele, the verb. And the verb actually is like two blocks. We have the wu is like a perfective marker on the front, and lidele, so it's wulidele. It's a perfective head, and then the rest of the verb. So when we remove the king, Then we have ma wulide, or wulidele. You can use the short or the long form. And if we keep the king there, but we shrink the servant, then we have ta me wulidele. And notice the me goes in the kids section because this is a mini pronoun. And if we do both, look at this. We're going to remove, the object is going to get, the king here is going to get removed as well. So that means, think of where this me is going to go. It's going to go in here. Watch this. Wumilidele, just like that. So that is all. When you're trying to shorten these sentences, you can kill the king, you can remove the king from the sentence, and you can shrink the servant. You can shrink the servant into a mini pronoun. You cannot take a servant and take it out of the sentence, and you can't take a king and you can't take a king and turn it into a mini pronoun. You can only shrink the servant into a mini pronoun and kill the king, to remove the king from the sentence. Now you can notice how this totally changes whether we use past or present. Ma ta wulidele, let's shrink it down, wumilidele, and if it's present, winamde. It's so totally different, but following the same rules. Kill the king and shrink the servant. When we have an intransitive verb, like rasidal, then obviously the only thing we can do is to kill the king, because all we have is a subject, which is the king. We have no servant. So instead we can say zarasigam, or we can say just rasigam without the king being mentioned. We can't shrink the king. We can't say something like rasigam me, because you can only shrink the servant. And with an intransitive phrase, you don't have any servant.